Hey guys! Tonight we tiptoe into one of those myths that feels like a whisper stitched into the folds of history. You're not battling titans or riding Pegasus. Not tonight. Nope. Tonight we're crouched low beside an old wooden loom somewhere in a sleepy courtyard, where the moon makes every string look like silver thread. There's a light breeze barely, and even the crickets seem to chirp in a polite rhythmic meter like they've memorized a pattern older than language. We're headed straight into the tale of how Athena, the battle-clad goddess with a spear in one hand and wisdom in the other, once taught the art of weaving to a spider. Kind of, accidentally. In a deeply petty and incredibly Greek way. And somehow the world's been crawling with her mistake ever since. And I'll be real with you, if you ever challenged a goddess to a craft-off in ancient Greece, you probably wouldn't survive this story. But hey, you're not the one with the loom. You're just here for the soft-spoken chaos and the gently absurd moral lesson. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing who's drifting off around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start in a little village near ancient Lydia, where the streets are just winding enough to confuse a chariot, and the stones remember more footsteps than names. It's the kind of place where folks still believe in omens tucked into owl hoots, and where every hearth keeps a spare seat for the gods just in case. And they're not far from a low vineyard wall. A single cottage glows just slightly warmer than the rest. The shutters are open and the air smells like wild thyme and scorched wool. Inside, a girl with dark, calloused hands leans over her loom. Her name not Arachne, not yet. She's just a girl for now. One who threads dyed wool through warp and weft so fast, the older women say she must have made a pact with something. Fingers too quick, patterns too perfect, and oh, the thing she chooses to weave. You lean closer. There's no epic battle scenes here, no polite temple offerings. Instead, she's stitching stories gods chasing mortals, disguises, unraveled punishments that feel a bit extra. She doesn't say anything scandalous aloud. She just weaves it quietly on the loom where gossip can't be traced. And the thing is, she's really good. Like suspiciously good. Historians still argue whether villages like this ever existed in the precise way myth describes, full of gifted women, quietly causing divine meltdowns. But they agree on one thing. Stories like these weren't meant to be forgotten. They were warnings. Cautionary tales with soft endings and hard truths. Now back in Olympus. Athena is technically minding her own business. She's polishing her helmet, reorganizing her scrolls, and being widely feared for her intellectual comebacks. But even a goddess has ears, and when whispers of the mortal who weaves better than a deity start fluttering up the mountain, Athena hears them, more than hears them. She listens, carefully, irritably, and then she does what no one expects. She doesn't blast lightning or summon monsters. She disguises herself as an old woman with kind eyes and a walking stick that might be just maybe a spear in retirement. Then she heads down the mountain through the olive groves and into that crooked little village to see for herself. But you don't see her yet. Tonight we're staying soft. We're curling up in the corner of that loom-lit cottage, watching the girl work while her cat purrs against the table leg and the wind hums ancient lullabies through the shutters. You blink slowly, lulled by the shuttle's click-clack rhythm. Outside, an owl blinks back. And somewhere hidden in the hills, a goddess is on her way not to wage war, not to bless a hero, but to confront the one thing she never expected, a teenage textile prodigy with absolutely no fear of offending Mount Olympus. You can hear the cane before you see her tap-tap scrape soft against the worn stone road. Morning in the village arrives with lazy certainty, goats yawning, roosters forgetting they already crowed, and someone down the lane sweeping dust that'll be back by lunch. Athena, though no one calls her that right now, is walking like her knees ache, and her sandals have regrets. She's wrapped in layers of muted gray hair, pinned up like a retired oracle, and her face is weathered in the way only gods pretending to be old mortals can manage. You'd think the disguise might be overkill, but you've seen enough myths to know this is standard divine sneak-around behavior. And today this goddess has a petty mission. You follow her past bread stalls and lazy dogs past gossiping potters and sun-wilted grapevines. The air smells like fermenting figs and linen drying on a line. And there it is again, that name. Arachne. Apparently she fixed a priest's cloak in 10 minutes flat. Apparently she embroidered the entire story of the Trojan horse in 6 panels, with accurate horse anatomy no less. Apparently she told the baker's wife that even the gods would envy her work. That last one, it sticks in Athena's divine craw. Now Athena, goddess of war and wisdom, is no stranger to craftsmanship. She literally invented the chariot. She built the first flute and then abandoned it because it puffed her cheeks out unattractively. She designed armor-sculpted strategies and allegedly gave humans the plow. But weaving, that's her comfort zone, her cozy corner of Olympus. So imagine her discomfort when she arrives at the cottage and peers through the window to see a mortal doing it better. There's Arachne, now fully named by local rumor and legend in the making. She's sitting with a spindle in her lap and a smirk playing on her face. Her fingers dance like they're having a conversation only thread understands. And her loom? It's not some rustic wood scrap. It's practically a throne of craftsmanship. Smooth beechwood, bronze inlays, suspiciously divine-looking tension bars, quirky detail. Some say Arachne's loom was a gift from a forest nymph with very strong opinions about aesthetics. Athena clears her throat. Not that Arachne notices. She's humming to herself, absorbed in her latest piece, a tapestry depicting the flirtations of Zeus. And by flirtations, we mean a montage of consensually questionable animal transformations. There's Zeus as a swan, as a bull, as a golden shower. Yes, really. You watch Athena's eyebrow twitch. Just once. The old woman disguise leans on her cane and steps inside. What are you weaving, child? Her voice is gravel and honey. Old, but not brittle. Arachne doesn't even glance up. Truth, she says. Pretty truth. And this is where things get slippery. Because in mythology, it's rarely the lie that offends the gods. It's the truth spoken too clearly. Especially in public, especially in color-fast wool thread. Athena shuffles closer, pretending to squint. You've got a clever hand. But you should thank the gods for such talent. Arachne snorts. Actually snorts. I thank my mother. She spun thread so fine it could snag moonlight. I thank my calluses. I thank me. Somewhere in the soft shadows of Olympus, a thundercloud raises one eyebrow. Historians still argue whether Arachne was truly arrogant or simply too honest for her time. Some suggest her story was a metaphor for ancient tensions between tradition and rebellion, worship and personal pride. But right now it's just 2 women, one pretending to be old, one pretending not to notice. Athena in disguise leans forward. You know, she says, voice syrup thick, the gods don't like being second best. Arachne shrugs. Then they should learn to weave. You don't hear the loom. You hear silence, and the kind that lands like fog and tastes like drama. Even the neighbor's rooster wisely skips his second round of crowing. The goddess's eyes flash just once, but she doesn't drop the act. Not yet. Instead, she says, would you like to challenge one of them? Just for fun? Arachne finally looks up. Her face isn't smug. It's curious. Curious like a cat sniffing the edge of a balcony. Fun, she repeats. Athena smiles, and it's not scary. A friendly contest. You and the gods, you weave what you know. And if you win, you'll be remembered. The girl tilts her head. And if I lose, oh, says the old woman, gently brushing a bit of wool from her shoulder, you'll still be remembered. Just maybe not with legs. But she says it so kindly that Arachne only half hears. You hear it, though. And as the morning stretches its golden fingers across the doorway, you sense that the village is about to host the least relaxing arts and crafts session in divine history. Somewhere behind you, a spider lowers itself from the rafters. Just listening, just in case. By the time the sun reaches its lazy noon peak, the whole village knows. Arachne's challenge, if you can call it that, has been accepted by the gods. Though no one's quite sure how formal this arrangement is, there's no scroll with signatures, no divine press release. Just the old woman vanishing into midday shadow and the unmistakable hum of something epic brewing beneath everyone's sandals. You sit just outside the cottage tucked beside a fig tree with dusty leaves and listen to the crackle of gossip weaving its way through the village faster than Arachne's shuttle ever could. The baker says Arachne's going to be smited mid-stitch. The fishmonger heard that Athena once turned a man to stone for sneezing disrespectfully. The potter ever practical is already sketching limited edition plates with the phrase, "I survived the great loom duel." Inside, Arachne rearranges her materials like a composer preparing for a symphony. Skeins of wool dyed with crushed berries and rare herbs. Threads so fine they float when she exhales near them. She's chosen her loom, she's sharpened her needles, she's even cleaned the cat spot by the fire just in case this is the last peaceful afternoon she'll get. And the topic she's picked, the misadventures of the Olympian gods. Bold. Not just bold, practically radioactive in myth terms. She begins with a scene of Zeus, because of course she does, transforming into a bull to pursue Europa. The wool curves into the shape of waves, the glint of an eye, the quiet horror of a story rewritten as romance. Then comes Apollo chasing Daphne as she turns into a tree, and Dionysus charming immortal women with wine and illusion. Each thread tells a truth everyone knows but no one says aloud. You can smell the faint tang of dye and toasted bread as Arachne weaves. Her fingers are fast but never rushed. Every motion is precise, and there's something trance-like about the rhythm. Over, under, twist, pull. Meanwhile, in Olympus, no longer in disguise, Athena is weaving too. Her loom is taller than a doorframe made of moonlight and logic, and she works with a calm that could freeze lava mid-eruption. Her tapestry is gorgeous, regal, the official PR-friendly version of Olympus. There's Poseidon raising islands from the sea, Artemis hunting nobly in the woods, Hermes delivering messages with a wink and zero mischief, and Athena herself. Naturally, she's front and center, bestowed with wisdom armored in reason, radiant with righteousness. It's less a tapestry and more a glowing resume. Historians still argue whether these tapestries were ever seen by human eyes. Whether the myth was a metaphor or whether somewhere in the ruins of time, the echo of those woven truths still lingers in ancient threads buried beneath temples. But here's what we know for certain: both women believed their work was the truth. And truth in Greek mythology, that's always dangerous. You glance back at Arachne's creation. It's nearly finished now. Around the edges of each scandal she's woven cleverly, almost invisibly, are symbols of everyday people. Farmers raising eyebrows, fishermen side-eyeing the gods, women specifically hiding laughter behind their hands. It's not mockery exactly, it's documentation, soft rebellion in wool. And then, almost without fanfare, the final threads are tied. Both tapestries complete. And just like that, the air changes. No wind, no bird song. Just a sudden pause in the atmosphere, like the universe is leaning in, breath-held, wondering who's about to blink first. Athena arrives not as the kindly old woman now, but in full divine regalia. Her spear hums softly, her cloak fluttering even in still air. A hush falls. Even the baker stops mid-roll. She doesn't look at Arachne right away. She looks at the tapestry. And for a moment, just a moment, she says nothing. Because it's beautiful. Technically flawless, emotionally resonant, uncomfortably accurate. Athena exhales through her nose, the ancient equivalent of a slow clap or a very controlled scream. "You've insulted the gods," she says quietly. "I showed their truth," Arachne replies. "Should I have embroidered flattering lies?" And that's the moment. The moment every myth turns. The place where mortals forget the rules, where gods remember their pride, and where fate stretches out its fingers like a bored cat inching toward the vase of your destiny. Athena doesn't raise her spear. She raises her hand, and gently she touches the tapestry. Threads ripple, Arachne sways. You feel the air tighten like it's been wrapped in yarn. And then everything changes. No lightning, no fire, just shrinking. Curling, limbs contracting, a softness turning alien. Arachne drops to the floor but not as herself, as something else. 8 legs, small body, a shiver of silk glands where once there was song. You stare, everyone does. She's still weaving, only now it's from the corners, from the ceilings, from the forgotten spaces between broom and floor. Athena watches, then says quietly, maybe even with a touch of remorse, so let her weave forever. And with that, the goddess vanishes. You're left in a village with a legend, with threads of warning and webs of truth, and with the very first spider perched on the windowsill, spinning something delicate in the fading light. It takes a little while for the villagers to believe what they've seen. You don't just watch a teenage girl morph into a spider and carry on weaving like it's just another Tuesday afternoon without needing to sit down and blink a few times. Maybe stare into your barley soup. Maybe start treating corners of your house with a little more reverence. For days afterward, the cottage feels different. The cat refuses to sit in its usual spot by the loom. Kids walk past on tiptoe. Someone leaves honey cakes on the windowsill, unsure whether to appease a goddess or the newest member of the local arthropod population. And you stand under the fig tree, again watching threads shimmer between ceiling beams like dewdrops spun from memory. Because here's the thing, Arachne didn't stop weaving. She just downsized. Every morning now, there's a new bit of silk impossibly fine clinging to doorposts and window latches. It's not random, it's deliberate. Curved patterns, interwoven symbols. Some folks swear it looks like scenes. You peer closely one day and swear you see the outline of a woman standing proudly beside her loom, surrounded by owls. Historians still argue whether the story of Arachne was meant to be a cautionary tale about pride or a quiet celebration of stubborn creativity. Some suggest her transformation was punishment. Others say it was mercy, letting her live out her passion forever, just with extra legs and better thread tension. But down here in the dust and morning light, the spider's work continues uninterrupted. And the village, for all its initial whispers, begins to adapt. Local weavers start leaving bits of dyed thread by their doorsteps, offerings, or collaborations, depending on how poetically you interpret household pest control. One woman claims her cloth never mildewed again after a spider spun 3 concentric circles in her bedroom. Another swears she got better at embroidery just by sleeping near Arachne's old workshop. You feel it too. A strange comfort may be knowing that someone is always spinning just out of sight. Making art in the quiet places. Turning corners into canvases. Meanwhile, up on Olympus, things are awkward. Athena sits in her stone chamber surrounded by scrolls and owls, and absolutely no one who dares bring up recent events. The gods are many things. Petty, volatile, astonishingly bad at conflict resolution, but they aren't blind. They saw the tapestry. They saw how perfectly Arachne told stories no mortal was supposed to say out loud. And now that the mortal in question has 8 legs and a webbed hobby, no one's quite sure what to do next. Zeus mutters something about maybe setting clearer boundaries. Dionysus suggests everyone just have some wine and move on. Hermes leaves a little silver thimble on Athena's windowsill with no explanation and absolutely no return address. Athena, to her credit, doesn't undo what she did, but she also doesn't gloat. Instead, she begins weaving again. And this time the patterns are smaller, quieter, less about glorious battles and more about hearths spinning wheels, women working by firelight. She doesn't say it aloud, but you suspect she's thinking about Arachne every time her fingers touch the thread. Meanwhile, the world keeps spinning same as ever, and spiders they spread. From corner to corner, temple to palace, cave to cottage. They go unnoticed most days, unless someone walks face first through a web and does that awkward flailing dance we all know too well. But what you didn't realize, what you notice now if you really look, is that the web holds shape even after panic. It's strong, resilient, Crafted with care, not just instinct. You lean back under the fig tree, again feeling the warmth of the sun soak into your bones. A strand of web glints overhead, strung between two branches. You watch as a tiny figure scuttles along it, impossibly delicate. And for a second, just a second, you think she pauses, looks your way, continues weaving. Not for you, not for the gods, just because it's what she does. And that somehow is enough. Days melt into weeks, and by now the tale of Arachne has spun its own web across the land. You hear it whispered in marketplaces, murmured at wells, embroidered into story quilts by old aunties who swear they once saw the loom girl before the legs. Her myth spreads faster than pomegranates ripen, and in true Greek fashion, it's already got at least 3 versions. In one, Arachne is a villain, arrogant, disrespectful, punished justly for daring to compare herself to the gods. In another, she's a tragic hero gifted, silence transformed for revealing the truth. And in yet another, she's, well, still a spider, but an extremely talented one, with an Etsy shop of ethereal web patterns that sells out instantly. Okay, that last one might be a modern embellishment. Still, the point remains, myths grow like vines, twisting, climbing, doubling back, and clinging to whatever structure gives them light. You're visiting a coastal town now, a few days' sail from Arachne's old village. Salt hangs thick in the air, gulls cackle like they're in on something, and the fishermen swear their nets last longer if they drape them over bushes where spiders have nested. The local temple. It's carved with olive branches, owls, and a curious new motif, a single web in the corner tucked discreetly behind Athena's shield. You step inside and a young priestess is sweeping the steps. She offers you a fig and asks if you've heard the new version. You nod slowly and sit on the warm stone, and she begins. In this telling, Arachne's story is not about punishment but transformation, a gift wrapped in consequence. The gods, she says, don't always mean to be cruel. Sometimes they're just bad at handling mortals who don't fall in line. You raise an eyebrow, but she only shrugs. Athena's the goddess of wisdom, she learns. And that's the strange truth, isn't it? Athena doesn't destroy Arachne's gift. She immortalizes it, like giving a bard a voice that never stops singing or a sculptor hands made of chisel-ready marble. Yes, Arachne loses her human form, but she gains something else, an eternal purpose, a thread through history. Historians still argue whether this myth was meant to scare girls into humility or encourage them to find pride in craft. Some point out that it's one of the rare tales where the mortal isn't killed outright. Others say it's about divine insecurity, how even gods can feel threatened by someone who makes beauty look effortless. You walk deeper into the temple. Shadows flicker as light filters through slatted windows. On the walls, painted in gentle ochre, are scenes of weaving. Not war, not conquest, just hands, looms, patterns. One panel shows a woman's face half covered in thread eyes, wise and tired. Another, a spider nestled in a corner, spinning the same motif over and over. You smile. Meanwhile, back in the world of woven silk and backroom gossip, spiders are enjoying their reputation boost. Farmers no longer sweep away webs with reckless abandon. Children leave crumbs on windowsills for Arachne in case she's hungry. Even the grumpy old magistrate now wears a cloak stitched with spider thread patterns, though he insists it's purely for aesthetic balance. And you notice things. Threads that hold a breeze a little longer. Corners that glint in morning light just so. The gentle hum of a world constantly remaking itself, one patient loop at a time. Somewhere far away in a sun-dappled grove, a young girl is threading her first loom. She's heard the stories, all of them. And she smiles not with arrogance, but with knowing. Because she understands the risk. And she chooses to weave anyway. You find yourself wandering past a village on the slopes of Mount Pelion, now where the sheep look suspiciously well brushed, and the dye vats smell like fermented berries and mild regret. The local weaving guild, yes, they have a guild, and yes, their logo now features a small, tasteful spider, is deep in preparations for the annual loom festival. There are looms everywhere. upright ground-based improvised ones made from olive branches lashed together. Children tangle themselves in skeins of wool that would horrify Athena's orderly temple. A nearby bard strums a lyre and hums a reworded ode to Our Lady of Eight Legs, which somehow rhymes arachnid with splendid. But the most striking thing is what they're all weaving. Stories, literal stories, not just decorative patterns or geometric flourishes, though those are here too obviously, but sprawling scenes. Persephone picking her first pomegranate, Orpheus glancing backward too soon, a nervous young mortal staring up at a suspiciously large swan. You move from loom to loom, quietly observing. One young woman has woven an image of Athena herself, not with glowing armor or divine thunder, but seated at a hearth, her sandals dusty, watching a spider scuttle across the floor. Historians still argue whether this festival actually existed or is a later invention meant to tie together disparate cults of craft worship across the region. Some even say it was a pretext for villagers to trade gossip-fermented fig wine, and especially fluffy wool. But one tablet fragment discovered in an abandoned weaving hut does seem to reference gathering in the goddess's threads. So who's to say? You pause near the center of the square where a ceremonial loom has been erected under a tree. On it, the oldest weaver wrinkles like unraveling ribbon fingers, nimble as myth works silently. She's threading together a new version of Arachne's story. In this version, Arachne never boasts. She simply weaves what she knows, no challenge, no defiance. Athena appears out of genuine curiosity, not trickery. They work side by side, not as rivals, but as collaborators. When the final tapestries are revealed, they differ in tone but not in truth. Athena nods. Arachne smiles. And no one is transformed, only changed. A retelling, a wishful edit, a reweaving of fate. You don't interrupt. You let the old woman work. Because myth is not fixed. It bends, loops, reknots. Like thread pulled tight, it can snap or hold depending on the care with which it's handled. Later, under a lavender-streaked sky, you settle by the fire with a few villagers. Someone passes roasted chestnuts. Someone else tells the version of the myth where Arachne becomes queen of spiders and hosts weekly storytelling salons in an enchanted thicket. The kids like that one. You gaze up at the stars, wondering if Arachne's web stretches that far. Across constellations between moonlight anchoring night to memory. A tiny spider descends beside your knee, dangling from a thread thinner than a whisper. You smile and whisper a greeting, careful not to exhale too sharply. Because you've learned something in all this, respect the weavers, even the small ones, especially the small ones. By now, your dreams are threaded with silk. Not metaphorically actual delicate threads seem to pull at the edges of your sleep. In the liminal quiet between dusk and dawn, you imagine spider legs tapping lightly against your pillow, arranging ancient patterns, while you snore obliviously through myth and memory. You've made your way to Athens, now the city of wisdom owls, and political debates held over way too much wine. The Acropolis looms overhead like a scolding parent, and somewhere in the labyrinth of backstreets you find a tiny shop with no sign and an open door. Inside looms, everywhere, miniature, massive, upright sideways, suspended from the ceiling like spider webs in freeze frame. Threads of every imaginable shade snake through the space in gentle, elegant chaos. And seated in the center, of course, is a spinner with hair like old linen and eyes like sun-baked olives. She offers you a stool, then a spindle. Try, she says, just that. So you do, awkwardly, like a goat learning ballet. And she watches. You know the story she asks after a while, not unkindly. You nod. Arachne. She hums, lips curling. Which one? Because by now you've realized there's no longer just the version. There's the original, if it ever existed. Then there's the Hesiod-adjacent version, the Ovid dramatization, the mystery cult interpretations, the child-friendly moral, the feminist reinterpretation, and most recently the one where Arachne is actually a time-traveling demigoddess who just really likes textiles. Historians still argue whether these offshoots diluted or enriched the myth. Some claim every retelling is a thread away from unraveling truth. Others say nonsense, each one reinforces the tapestry. After all, what's a myth if not a story designed to be retold? The spinner points to a tapestry on the wall. That one's mine, she says. Athena and Arachne playing a board game. The winner teaches the loser to weave better. You glance at the woven scene. Two women laughing, a board between them. One grinning, the other mid-eye roll. Arachne, you guess, is the one with the smug smile. I like to think they made up, the spinner says. Pride is lonely. You nod again, unsure how to respond. Because somewhere deep down you feel it too, the loneliness baked into these myths. Gods and mortals always at odds, always too proud or too fragile or too curious for their own good. But here in this little shop in a city built on philosophy and goat milk, the story has softened. You ask her if spiders are welcome here. She gestures upward where the rafters sparkle with gentle silk threads. They pay rent in patterns, she says. That night you dream of a loom the size of a mountain. Each strand of thread hums softly, alive with memory. Arachne walks along the beams barefoot, one human foot, 7. Spidery ones, pausing now and then to tweak a line, change a color. She nods at you once, approvingly, and you wake up to a thread on your sleeve, soft as breath, strong as fate. You're not entirely sure how you ended up in Delphi, but here you are, half drowsy from too much honeyed barley, and trying not to fall off the ancient stone steps while looking way too reverently at some ruins. The Oracle's temple sits like a faded bookmark in a story you're still learning how to read. It smells like time and old echoes. You linger by the edge of a collapsed column, tracing moss patterns with your fingertip, and wondering whether Apollo still drops by to offer vague advice and cryptic dating tips. Probably not. But then again, if a girl can turn into a spider and still keep weaving, who's to say? Inside one of the temple's side chambers, cool, cracked, and echoing. With the size of the centuries, you find something curious. A tapestry. It's not on display. More like forgotten, half-covered in dust and shadow. But its edges shimmer faintly, and when you lean in, you realize this is not some generic temple souvenir. It's a scene. A woman face calm but determined, seated at a loom so intricate the threads disappear into the very stone of the wall. Beside her, another woman, helmet set aside, eyes watching. Arachne and Athena, side by side. This isn't punishment. It's study, collaboration, a woven dream of what might have been or what still could be. The lines are precise, subtle, and utterly out of place in a city that prides itself on prophecy, not practical skills. You blink. You back away. You imagine what this room might have been centuries ago, a place for the unspoken truths, the secret students, the mythologies not fit for official shrines. Historians still argue whether this chamber was a school for priestesses, a storage room, or merely a hallway that someone creatively misinterpreted. Theories abound. Evidence is thin. But the tapestry is very real. Outside, the wind kicks up tiny eddies of dust, and you overhear a guide telling a group of yawning tourists about how Delphi's priests once used laurel leaves and volcanic fumes to access divine visions. The tourists check their phones. One sneezes loudly. You linger instead. Something about Arachne's story, this version of it anyway, feels like a quiet resistance. Not defiance, not rebellion, just not disappearing. Still making, still weaving, still showing up even if the spotlight is aimed somewhere else. You hike up the hill to the old amphitheater. It's empty, the seats like broken teeth under the sun, and your feet crunch on gravel as you climb to the very top. From here, the view swells. Olive groves, distant sea. A path winding down the mountain like a frayed thread, unspooling towards somewhere new. You sit. You breathe. You think of Arachne not as a warning, but a whisper. A reminder. Not every myth needs to be loud to last. Some wrap themselves around you gently, a soft tug at your sleeve, a glint in the rafters. A thread you didn't know was guiding you until you look back. And when you do, you find you're already weaving something of your own. You follow the thread metaphorically, but also sort of literally southward toward the sun-drenched plains of the Peloponnese. The air is thicker here, filled with the sense of wild rosemary and the sharp tang of overripe olives. The towns are quieter, older. Everyone seems to move a little slower, like they're trying not to wake the gods sleeping under the stones. In one of these towns, barely more than a cluster of houses and a single determined donkey, you find a shrine that doesn't appear on any map. It's carved into a cliffside, modest and moss-covered, with only a faint sigil above the entrance, a spider delicately chiseled legs outstretched in a looping spiral. Inside, the air is cool and still. You brush past hanging herbs and brittle offerings, dried fruit-woven doll, coins polished smooth by countless fingers. There's no statue, no altar, just an ancient loom worn down to its wooden bones and a stone bench beside it. A young girl sits there, back straight, hands moving rhythmically. She doesn't look up when you enter. She just keeps weaving. You sit nearby, careful not to disturb the dust patterns on the floor. Eventually, she speaks. "She came here, you know." You nod, though you don't ask who she means. "Arachne," she says anyway, as if it were obvious. After everything, after the challenge, after the change. You glance around, trying to imagine a spider crawling these walls, finding solace in solitude. But the girl shakes her head. "She wasn't a spider here," she says. "Not always." Historians still argue whether Arachne's myth ever extended to rural cult worship, or if local legends simply absorbed her story over time. Some say this shrine predates her tale entirely, that the spider was a symbol of patience long before Arachne ever dared to weave scandal into divine linen. Others insist this is where she truly lived out her days, not scuttling through forests, but quietly weaving hope into thread. The girl tells you about the patterns, how they're taught from mother to daughter, grandmother to granddaughter, each with its own meaning. One not to bless harvests, another to mend broken friendships, a particularly elaborate one to protect goats from sudden stampedes. You don't ask how that works. You just nod solemnly. She hands you a piece of cloth. It's small, no larger than your palm, but impossibly intricate. Threads loop and twist into a spiral pattern that seems to move if you stare long enough. It feels deliberate, not decorative, narrative. The story of a girl who spoke with her hands and told the truth in silk. You tuck it into your bag without words. That night you camp under fig trees heavy with scent. You dream of the loom again, only now it spans the sky. Stars hang like knots in a vast web, and Arachne moves through them, gently adjusting their positions with infinite care. When she notices you watching, she doesn't smile. She just nods once and keeps weaving. You wake with a thread of spider silk in your hair, glinting gold in the dawn light. It's evening now, and you're wandering the winding alleys of Corinth. The stone streets are still warm from the sun, and somewhere nearby a cat yawns dramatically atop a ruined column. Corinth has always had flair, one foot in the gods' realm, the other strutting around in sandals too expensive to be practical. You pass by mosaics that glimmer like spilled wine and stalls where merchants insist their olives have been blessed by Aphrodite herself. You don't buy the olives, but you do buy the story, which is arguably the better deal. At the edge of the marketplace, you spot something unexpected. A makeshift amphitheater no bigger than a courtyard with flickering oil lamps and a linen sheet strung up as a backdrop. Tonight's performance, Arachne, the loom of truth. You settle in quietly on the stone bench, cool now under the stars, and watch as a young troupe of actors begins their tale. They're barefoot, earnest, and occasionally forget their lines, but something about it all feels right. They don't play the story for laughs, but they don't treat it like a tragedy either. Their Arachne is sharp-tongued and brilliant. Their Athena is thoughtful but proud. And when the confrontation arrives, they lock eyes, not with fury but with frustration. Like two artists with different visions clashing over a mural they're painting on the same wall. And then comes the twist. In this version, Arachne wins, not by humiliating Athena, but by showing her something she didn't expect: compassion. Her tapestry doesn't just depict the gods' flaws, it weaves in their kindnesses too. Their regrets, their moments of tenderness. Athena moved doesn't curse her, she blesses her, turns her into a spider not out of punishment, but protection. A form the actor playing Athena says softly that will let your work endure unnoticed, untouched, eternal. It's a quiet ending. No lightning, no gasps, just Arachne slipping away into the shadows, leaving behind a thread that still glows faintly under the moonlight. Historians still argue whether Arachne's story influenced Greek drama, or if this is just the latest generation remixing old tales like heirloom recipes. Some suggest these grassroots performances are attempts to reclaim agency for figures long reduced to footnotes. Others point out that spiders are having a bit of a PR renaissance. You stay until the actors take their final bow. There's no applause, just nods, sleepy smiles, a dropped fig or two. Later, walking through the quiet streets, you find yourself looking at every web a little differently. You picture each one as a miniature stage suspended between doorways and eaves. Arachne's theater still playing out for anyone willing to look closely. And somewhere just out of reach, she's watching. Not with bitterness, but with pride. The thread continues one strand at a time. You wake to the sound of weaving. Not bird song, not bells, just that soft, rhythmic pull thread sliding over wood, the faint creak of a loom in motion. It takes you a moment to realize it's not a dream. You're in a monastery now, tucked into the cliffs above the sea. The Aegean stretches out below like spilled blue dye, and the wind carries salt, and the promise of very judgmental goats. Inside, the halls are hushed and cool, decorated not with icons or gold, but with fabrics, hundreds of them. Panels, banners, tablecloths, even a couple of monk-sized tunics embroidered with rather alarming precision. The monastery, it turns out, is dedicated to quiet disciplines, herbalism, translation, and you guessed it, weaving. The monks don't speak much. One of them gestures for you to follow, and you're led down a long corridor to a vaulted room glowing with candlelight. Here, rows of looms stand like pews, each one worked by someone focused, serene, and absolutely covered in thread fluff. You sit and watch. Eventually, the lead monk, a man who looks like he's been awake since the Bronze Age, joins you with a gentle nod. Arachne, you whisper. He nods again, unsurprised. She's one of ours. And you're not sure if he means that literally like a secret saint or more philosophically like she represents something deeper. A kind of devotion that doesn't need temples or sacrifices. Just focus. Craft. Repetition. That quiet magic of doing something well over and over until it becomes a kind of prayer. He shows you a scroll, not of scripture, but a pattern. Its intricate looping far too complex for your sleep-fogged brain. She left this, he says, pointing to a symbol near the bottom. Or someone did. Hard to know. Historians still argue whether this pattern originated with Arachne or was attributed to her centuries later by monks trying to spice up their textile curriculum. Some suggest it was a Byzantine forgery. Others say it's just another thread in the myth, frayed but holding. You're allowed to try a simple version of the design. Your hands fumble, your threads snarl, and at one point you manage to tie a knot that defies physics. Still, the monks smile. She wouldn't mind, they say. You eat dinner in silence, lentils, olives. A surprisingly judgmental tomato, and afterward, you're shown to a small room with a woven curtain instead of a door. On the wall hangs a tiny tapestry, a spider nestled in the crook of a loom. The moon glows in the background, full and soft. That night you dream not of gods or monsters, but of threads. Endless shimmering threads, some tangled, some taut, some weaving stories you haven't heard yet, and one thin silver patient trailing from your fingers into the dark. Morning finds you in motion again, though it's hard to say if you're walking through Greece or just through memory at this point. The path dips and curves like the hem of an old chiton, and the sun casts golden puddles on everything it touches. You sip something vaguely citrusy from a clay cup handed to you by a sleepy vendor who might have been a goat in disguise. Honestly, You've stopped questioning these things. Today you find yourself among the ruins of a once grand villa, the kind that probably had 47 columns just to prove the owner had 47 more drachma than his neighbor. Now, it's a tangle of moss, fig roots, and shattered mosaic tiles that seem to rearrange themselves into new pictures every time you blink. And right there, carved into the remaining threshold stone, you see it a spider. Not hidden this time, bold, proud, poised like it owns the place. Inside the ruined atrium, you spot the faint outline of a faded fresco on the wall, mostly gone now, just fragments and whispers. But from the curve of a jaw, the sweep of a cloak, the glint of thread painted in once shimmering ochre, you can just make out a scene. A woman at a loom, and beside her a goddess. You lean in. Unlike the other versions, this one shows no conflict, no punishment. Just the two women bent over their work, smiling slightly, sharing a pattern perhaps, or comparing technique. It's intimate, quiet, domestic even. Historians still argue whether Roman homes in Greece adapted local myths to reflect more harmonious ideals, or whether this was simply one homeowner's private imagining. Some suggest it was commissioned by a patron whose daughter was a weaver herself, maybe one who liked stories with better endings. You walk through the rest of the villa slowly, like you're tiptoeing through someone else's memories. At the back you discover a half-buried trunk. Inside, remnants of thread iron, loom weights, and a spindle worn smooth by years of nervous hands. There's also a scrap of linen preserved by luck or perhaps sheer stubbornness. The pattern is simple but elegant, a spider spinning a constellation into the sky. You hold it up to the light. Even faded, it's beautiful. You imagine the girl who made it. Maybe she heard the story of Arachne whispered while she learned to spin. Maybe it made her feel brave, or seen. Or maybe she just liked spiders and thought it was funny. That night you sleep on a woven mat under the open sky. You dream of women weaving side by side in a villa lit by oil lamps. Arachne hums as she threads stars into silk. Athena offers critique, then catches herself and just helps. No competition, no curse, just craft. And when you wake, your fingers twitch like they've been moving in your sleep. By now, you've stopped expecting linearity. Myths like dreams don't move in straight lines. They loop and tangle, weaving over themselves until time becomes just another thread in the pattern. So it doesn't surprise you when you arrive in a village where no one has ever heard of Arachne, but everyone knows the Spider Woman. She doesn't live in the hills, she is the hills, or the wind, or that creaky rafter in the oldest house that keeps rhythm with the night. Here, the Spider Woman is less a person, more a presence guardian of craft protector, of those who work quietly with their hands. Farmers leave bits of woven grass in the corners of their barns. Bakers twist dough into spirals before placing it in the oven. Even the children carry tiny yarn braids in their pockets, charms against forgetfulness. In the village square, an elderly woman sits with a spindle in her lap and a glint in her eye that could probably rethread the universe if she felt like it. You ask about Arachne and she just laughs. Child, she says, that's one name. She goes on to explain in a voice like honey steeped in time that the Spider Woman has many stories. In some, she's born from threads themselves, stitching the stars into place. In others, she's the shadow that guides lost travelers home, trailing silk from tree to tree. And in one, her favorite, she's a girl who challenged a goddess, yes, but not out of pride. Out of love. For her craft. For the truth. For the belief that beauty should be shared, not hoarded like lightning bolts and grudges. Historians still argue whether these kinds of localized myths are adaptations of broader Olympian tales or represent pre-Greek belief systems that got woven into the dominant pantheon, like floral borders on a state-issued toga. Either way, the Spider Woman endures. Later, over a bowl of lentil stew so perfectly seasoned it nearly triggers a religious experience. You're handed a small token, a carved wooden shuttle polished smooth by generations of fingers. For your journey, the elder says, you sleep in a tiny house that smells like lavender and old books. The walls are hung with cloth, some coarse, some fine, all stitched with care. One depicts a spider building a bridge from one mountaintop to another. You dream of crossing that bridge. Halfway across, you pause. Below is mist, above is thread, and ahead, Arachne waits not with judgment, not even with answers, just an extra spool of thread. Because you'll need it. You descend from the hill slowly, as if your feet have learned to tread with reverence. The path winds through olive groves and whispering grasses, each step soft as a hush. Everything smells faintly of warmth-baked stone, crushed time, distant sea. At the edge of a salt-crusted fishing village, you stumble on something peculiar, a festival. Not the riotous kind with drunken satyrs and surprise marriages. This one is quieter, woven, literally. It's the festival of threads. Children run about with ribbons tied to their wrists, trailing color like kites. The elders sit in circles, weaving stories as much as cloth. Booths line the harbor, their canopies stitched from patchwork fabrics. Even the boats have sails patterned with images you've started to recognize: spiders, looms, stars, women with purposeful hands. You wander past a storytelling tent where a young man with a voice like smoke recites a familiar tale. A goddess, a mortal girl, a challenge, a curse, a transformation. But he adds something new. He tells of the years that followed, of the spider who whispered secrets to weavers in their dreams, who left silk trails for lost poets, who stitched together not just stories but people, not out of vanity, not even vengeance, out of necessity, because he says threads are what bind us, and someone had to hold the ends. Historians still argue whether Arachne's myth truly evolved into a folk figure celebrated in regional festivals, or if this is a modern invention retrofitted to look ancient. Some scholars note similarities to pre-Hellenic rituals. Others point out that festivals with woven symbols tend to pop up wherever humans get bored and inventive with string. As night falls, you find yourself joining a lantern-lit procession. Everyone carries a small offering, woven, carved, knotted, braided. Yours is the shuttle from the village, now looped with your own makeshift thread. At the center of the square stands a massive loom, its frame draped in contributions from past festivals. The oldest pieces are frayed and faded, the newest shimmer with fresh dye and bold hands. Someone lifts your offering and gently tucks it into a waiting space like a final stitch on a nearly complete hem. You don't say anything, you just breathe. The firelight flickers across the gathered crowd, and for a moment, just a blink, you think you see her. In the shadows near the loom. Not monstrous, not mourning, just watching, approving. And when she vanishes, all that's left behind is a tiny spiderweb on the loom's corner, glinting gold in the flame. You wake just before dawn, the sky stretched thin with early light, and the sea muttering quietly to itself below the cliffs. The festival square is empty now, save for a few ribbons drifting lazily across the cobblestones, and the loom still standing still, woven through with every visitor's quiet offering. You trace your fingers along the wood, feeling the impressions of years, maybe centuries. Someone has carved a small spiral into one corner. And for a second, you swear it moves, curling inward, like the start of a thread pulling you gently onward. There's nowhere left to go, really. Not physically, but inside you, something has shifted subtly but completely. The way dust motes shift in sunlight, or how a single strand of thread woven carefully can hold a whole cloth together. You walk out of the village along a path lined with wildflowers and smooth stones that feel like they've been waiting underfoot forever. As you move, you catch glimpses, small signs that Arachne's story has never really left. A merchant wrapping his bread in cloth stitched with constellations. A child braiding grass tongue between her teeth in deep concentration. A temple wall where someone has scrawled a tiny spider above the lintel in charcoal. At a crossroads, you meet an old woman selling skeins of dyed wool so rich in color they feel impossible. She smiles, offers you one sea glass green, and says you'll need it for whatever's next. And just like that, you're holding a future you haven't quite imagined yet. Historians still argue whether myths like Arachne's serve as warnings or invitations. Were they meant to curb ambition, or to recognize its cost than dare us to try anyway? The answer's probably yes, to all of it. Because that's the thing about weaving, it's full of knots of false starts of threads you meant to tie off but didn't. And yet somehow the cloth still holds? Maybe not perfectly, but sturdily, honestly, humanly. You pause by a fig tree, its branches twisted like a loom in motion. In the crook of one limb you see a web. Tiny, perfect, glinting in the rising sun. And there right in the center a spider waits. Not a monster, not a punishment, just a weaver. Still working. Maybe always working. You smile, not at her but with her. Because now you understand. It was never about winning or losing. It was about creating. About daring to weave something beautiful even when no one asked you to. Especially then. And with that, you keep walking the green thread tucked safely in your palm. The story doesn't end, but it does rest. Let the images now begin to fade. The loom in the square quiet beneath the stars. The thread in your hand soft as memory. The whisper of a spider's leg gliding over silk. Let it all stretch out gently into the slow stillness of sleep. The roads of myth unwind like curling vines looping back through centuries of breath and imagination. You've walked them now at your own pace, meeting gods and girls' stories told and retold until they softened at the edges, until they became part of your own thread. Feel your breath slow. Feel the warmth in your limbs. Each muscle loosening like a knot gently worked free. You don't need to remember every name. You don't need to solve every mystery. Some tales exist not to be answered but simply to be held. You are wrapped now in a tapestry woven just for you of silk and sleep and quiet wonder. Let the loom still. Let the thread fall slack. And as your thoughts drift like feathers on a breeze, know that somewhere in a quiet corner of myth and moonlight, she is still weaving. For you, for all of us. One silent, perfect web at a time. Good night, dreamer.